By the time you realize what's at stake, it's already too late. The rain poured down in sheets, bouncing off the cracked sidewalks of the city. Beneath the flickering neon lights, Michael Cortez stepped out of his sleek black car, adjusting the cufflinks of his tailored suit. The alleyway stank of damp trash and desperation, a fitting place for what he was about to do. He'd spent years clawing his way up the corporate ladder, stepping on anyone who got in his way. Money had come first, then power. But respect, that elusive prize, had always evaded him. The old guard in the boardroom still saw him as a scrappy outsider, a hustler who didn't belong in their world. Tonight, that would change. "Are you sure about this?" came the voice from behind him. Sarah Reynolds, his sharp-witted and dangerously capable assistant, emerged from the shadows. Her eyes were cool, calculating. Michael nodded, his jaw set. It's the only way. They approached the warehouse, where the most powerful man in the city, Victor Malinoff, waited. Victor was not the type to be trifled with. He was the kingmaker, the one who could hand you everything or take it all away in a heartbeat. He dealt in favors, secrets, and power plays, all under the table. And tonight, Michael was here to make the deal of a lifetime. Inside, Victor sat at a long, dimly lit table, flanked by his goons. His cold eyes settled on Michael as he entered. "You brought it?" Victor asked in his deep, gravelly voice. Michael handed him a slim, encrypted briefcase. Inside was a drive containing sensitive information that could bring down half the city's power players. It was worth billions to the right buyer: criminal records, blackmail material, and dirty money trails. Victor smirked as he took the briefcase. "With this, you'll own the city. Money, power, respect, it'll all be yours." But Michael had done his homework. He knew Victor had a reputation for double-crosses. That was why Sarah had planted a failsafe, a virus in the drive that could wipe the data remotely if Victor tried anything funny. "I want everything you promised," Michael said. "Full immunity. A seat at your table. I want respect, Victor. You can buy it, you know." Victor's smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. "Respect isn't bought, my friend. It's earned. And if you want it, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes." Michael felt a chill down his spine. Something was wrong. The room seemed to close in on him. He noticed one of Victor's men discreetly adjusting his jacket, revealing the outline of a gun. "You didn't think it would be this easy, did you?" Victor asked, his tone mocking now. "You've got money, and you've got a little power. But respect? No one respects a man who takes shortcuts." Michael glanced at Sarah. She met his gaze with a subtle nod. They were ready for this. Suddenly, the warehouse doors burst open. Armed men in tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised. It was a team Michael had hired, mercenaries who played by no rules but their own. The room exploded in chaos. Michael hit the ground as bullets whizzed overhead. He could hear Victor cursing, yelling for his men to retaliate. But Sarah was already moving, pulling out her sidearm and firing off calculated shots, taking down 2 of Victor's goons in a heartbeat. Victor was pinned down behind the table, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think this is over, Cortez?" he shouted over the gunfire. "You think you can take me down?" Michael, still crouched, looked up and met Victor's eyes. "I don't need to take you down. I just need to survive tonight." With a swift motion, he pressed a button on his watch. The virus Sarah had implanted in the drive was activated, but it wasn't just designed to wipe the data. It was designed to leak it to every major news outlet in the country. Within seconds, phones buzzed, and the screens of the thugs around the room lit up with alerts. The headlines were already breaking: city's underworld exposed, corruption, extortion, and the rise of Victor Malinoff. Victor's face twisted in rage as he realized what had happened. "You fool! You've doomed us both." Michael stood, brushing the dust off his suit. "No, Victor. I've just freed myself." The gunfire had ceased. The mercenaries were finishing their sweep of the warehouse, leaving only Michael, Sarah, and a seething Victor. Michael walked up to him, leaning down to meet his gaze. You thought money was enough. You thought power was enough. But respect, Victor? You don't take shortcuts to respect. You earn it. Victor spat blood, glaring up at him. You'll never have it. Not after this. Michael stood up, signaling to Sarah. She approached, handing him a phone. He dialed a number and spoke into it. It's done. On the other end, a voice responded. Good. Your seat is ready. Michael smiled and handed the phone to Victor. Talk to your boss. Maybe he can save you. As Michael and Sarah turned to leave, Victor's voice crackled with panic behind them. Wait! You can't leave me like this. You don't know what they'll do to me. Michael didn't look back. The city was now his for the taking, but more than that, he had finally earned something that couldn't be bought with money or seized through power. He had earned his place, and with it, the respect of everyone who had once stood in his way. As the rain began to fall again, he stepped into the night, his eyes set on the horizon. The city skyline glittered like a crown jewel in the night as Michael sat in his penthouse, the weight of his recent triumph heavy on his shoulders. He was now the king, with more power than he had ever dreamed of, and the respect he had craved was finally his. But there was a nagging feeling deep inside, a whisper that warned the price he paid was far steeper than he realized. The phone rang, breaking the uneasy silence. Sarah's name flashed across the screen. It's done, she said when he answered. Victor's gone. But there's a problem. Michael's hand tightened around the phone. What problem? Victor's people aren't folding like we thought. They're mobilizing, and fast. Word is, some of his old allies are plotting something. And there's a bounty out for you. Michael remained silent for a moment, staring out at the vast city he now controlled. He had expected retaliation, but not so soon. How much? He asked finally. Enough to make everyone pay attention. 10 million. Dead or alive. Michael stood from his chair and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The reflection staring back at him looked composed, almost serene, but inside, a storm was brewing. His enemies weren't just hunting him, they were coming to take everything. I'll handle it, he said calmly, hanging up. 1 week later. The night of the gala arrived, a grand affair held to celebrate Michael's ascent to the top of the city's corporate world. Politicians, CEOs, and social elites filled the room, all there to toast his success. The media had painted him as the man who cleaned up the city, a hero who exposed corruption and brought down a criminal empire. But as Michael mingled with the guests, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, he could feel the cracks beginning to form beneath the surface. Sarah moved quietly at his side, ever watchful, scanning the room for threats. You think they'll make a move tonight? She asked, her voice low. Michael's eyes flicked to a group of men near the bar, Victor's old allies. They were laughing, holding their drinks, but their gazes kept darting toward him. They wouldn't dare, he replied. Not here. Not with all these eyes on us. Sarah smirked. You underestimate them. Desperation makes people bold. He knew she was right. Victor's fall had left a vacuum, and power vacuums never stayed empty for long. Even as he stood at the pinnacle, others were scheming, plotting to tear him down. The bounty on his head had drawn attention from the darkest corners of the city. Mercenaries, assassins, and old enemies were now closing in. As the night dragged on, Michael's mind wandered. He thought back to the path he had taken, the choices he had made. Every decision had been calculated, every betrayal a necessary step toward victory. But now, with the weight of everything he had gained, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through his fingers. Respect. That elusive prize. It was supposed to be eternal. But respect earned through fear had a short shelf life. Later that night, the gala ended without incident, and Michael retreated to his penthouse, his sanctuary. The city stretched out before him, an empire built on secrets and lies. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, swirling the amber liquid as he stared out into the night. Suddenly, a faint knock echoed from the hallway. Sarah, who had stayed close as usual, was already moving toward the door, gun drawn. "Who is it?" she barked. There was no answer. She motioned for Michael to stay back as she approached the door, her finger tight on the trigger. She swung it open, gun raised, only to find a small envelope lying on the floor. No one else was in sight. Sarah picked it up, inspecting it carefully. "It's for you." Michael frowned as she handed him the envelope. It was plain, no markings except for his name written in neat, cursive handwriting. He slid his finger under the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was short. "Everything has a cost. Tonight, you pay yours." His blood ran cold. He immediately turned toward Sarah, but before he could say anything, the lights in the penthouse cut out, plunging the room into darkness. A moment later, the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. "Stay close," Michael whispered, his hand moving to the gun in his jacket. Sarah was already beside him, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Suddenly, the glass shattered. An explosion of gunfire ripped through the room. Sarah fired back into the darkness, moving with precision, but the attackers were already inside. Figures in black tactical gear swarmed the penthouse, silent and deadly. Michael ducked behind a marble pillar, adrenaline surging through him. He returned fire, but there were too many of them. This wasn't just an assassination attempt, this was an execution. Sarah took down one of the assailants, but another appeared behind her, firing a single shot into her back. She gasped, her body crumpling to the ground. "Sarah!" Michael shouted, his heart racing as he emptied his clip at the attacker, taking him down. But it was too late. She was gone. Michael was out of options. He dashed toward the hidden panic room, bullets whizzing past his head. He slammed the door shut, the thick steel barrier sealing him in. Breathing heavily, Michael slumped against the wall. He was alone now. Sarah was dead. His empire was crumbling around him. Outside, the sounds of footsteps and muffled voices faded into the night. The attackers had gone, leaving only destruction behind. He reached for his phone with trembling hands. The message was still on the screen, glaring back at him, "Everything has a cost." For the first time in years, Michael felt fear. The kind of fear that came with knowing you've gone too far, that you've taken too much without realizing the price. Money. Power. Respect. He had gained them all, but now, he understood. They had cost him everything. Michael sat in the darkness of the panic room, his breath echoing in the small, steel enclosure. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the adrenaline of the attack, but from the weight of realization. Everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, was crumbling. The city was his, but for how much longer? His phone buzzed in his hand, the screen lighting up with a notification. A video message. He opened it. The screen flickered, and there he was, Victor Malinoff. Bloodied, but alive. The video had been recorded hours earlier, before Victor was executed, his defiant smile a haunting reminder of the man who had once ruled the city. "You thought you could get rid of me that easily, didn't you?" Victor's voice was hoarse, but venomous. "You thought you won. But this city doesn't belong to you, Michael. Not in the way you think. The power you took isn't yours. It belongs to the shadows, the ones who stay hidden while men like you burn bright for a little while." Victor leaned closer into the camera, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're coming for you, Cortez. The ones who gave me my seat at the table. The ones you never saw coming. You won't survive this. You don't know what true power is." The video ended abruptly. Michael's hand tightened around the phone, his mind racing. He had thought Victor's fall had left him as the uncontested ruler, but this was something else. Victor hadn't been the true power behind the throne. There was someone else, someone far more dangerous, and now, they were coming for him. The door to the panic room beeped softly, signaling an incoming call on the encrypted line. Michael hesitated for a moment before answering. "Mr. Cortez," the voice on the other end was calm, chillingly so. "You've caused quite a stir tonight." "Who are you?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The voice laughed softly. "You've been sitting on a throne made of sand, Michael. Did you really think your rise to power went unnoticed? We allowed you to have your fun, to burn brightly for a time. But now your time is up. You've crossed lines you didn't even know existed." Michael's throat tightened. "If this is about Victor—" "It's not about Victor," the voice interrupted, growing cold. "Victor was just a pawn, like you. The difference is, he knew his place. You've forgotten yours." A silence followed, thick with tension. Michael's mind raced. Whoever this was, they were more than just another power player. They were operating at a level far beyond anything he had encountered. "What do you want?" Michael asked finally, his voice low. "What I want, Mr. Cortez, is for you to understand one thing: money, power, and respect, they are not yours to keep. They are lent to you. You had your chance to play the game, and you played it well, I'll admit. But you overreached. You made enemies of people you should have feared. Now, it's time to pay the price." A cold sweat broke out on Michael's forehead. "And what price is that?" The voice on the other end was eerily calm. "Everything." Suddenly, the panic room's lights flickered. The secure systems that protected him began to fail, one by one. Michael frantically checked the monitors. His security feeds had gone dark, his emergency backups offline. "They're inside," he whispered to himself, realizing the gravity of his situation. "Goodbye, Mr. Cortez," the voice said, before the call cut off. The panic room's door hissed open, the hydraulics overridden by an unseen force. Michael's pulse raced as footsteps echoed through the hallway outside. He had no time to think, only react. Grabbing the pistol from his desk, he moved toward the door, knowing this was it, his final stand. The first figure appeared in the doorway, dressed in black tactical gear. Without hesitation, Michael fired, the shot echoing in the confined space. The man dropped, but more came. They moved like shadows, efficient, emotionless. Michael ducked behind a metal shelf, firing at the approaching figures, but for every one he took down, two more appeared. They were relentless, closing in with surgical precision. A flash of pain tore through his side as a bullet grazed him. Michael gritted his teeth, stumbling back. His vision blurred as blood trickled down his ribs, but he kept firing, driven by sheer will. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about defiance. As the assailants advanced, a sudden explosion rocked the building. Smoke filled the room, and the attackers faltered. For a split second, Michael thought reinforcements had arrived. But then he saw her, Sarah. No, not Sarah. But someone who looked just like her. The woman moved through the smoke, taking down the remaining men with ruthless efficiency. Her movements were fluid, deadly. Within seconds, the attackers were all on the ground, either dead or incapacitated. Michael stared in disbelief, clutching his bleeding side. "Sarah," he rasped. The woman stepped into the light, her features cold and familiar, but not quite the same. "Sarah's gone," she said flatly. "But I was sent to finish what she couldn't." "Who are you?" Michael demanded, his voice weak. "Someone who owes you nothing," she replied, kneeling beside him. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a syringe, injecting him before he could protest. What is this?" Michael gasped, feeling his body weaken. "Your reckoning," she said, standing up. "You thought you could escape it. You thought you were untouchable. But no one is untouchable." His vision blurred, darkness closing in. The last thing he saw was the cold, distant look in her eyes as she walked away, leaving him to bleed out on the cold marble floor. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, leave a comment, subscribe and share for more short fiction fix.